the breakout room with me for that really terrific discussion. Really appreciated all that you brought to it. And actually, with that in mind, I want to thank all of you who showed up tonight and um, exhibited vulnerability and a desire and an interest in connecting with others about these topics that are so important and so energizing in many ways, to be able to have these conversations in what feels like a nice, safe place, this beautiful space that Nelanie and the rest of her collaborators have created. So thank you for that, and thank you for inviting me. So I want to make sure I get this right. I'm going to start by having each of the facilitators uh, give about a 45-second kind of review of kind of high-level review of how those discussions went in your breakout room. And I will go last, and then with whatever remaining time we have, I will share a few words with all of you. So if someone could help me, I foolishly cannot find on my notes the names of each of the facilitators. So maybe you could type them in the chat box for me, and that way I will know to call on each person. With that, I will have Marie Faley. If I'm saying your name right, I hope I'm saying it right. Marie Faley, would you please go first?
I will. I'd love to. Interesting that there were people from the East Coast and the West Coast in the group, and they talked about the different views of police in East Coast, West Coast, and the police state of the East Coast. Again, it was brought up that Donald Trump is doing us a favor because he's waking everybody up to, by talking about racism, he's waking people up to racism. The pandemic is highlighting our lack of leadership, and America is mentally backward, and education is very, very important to guide us to a much, much better space.
Thank you very much for that succinct and well-timed review. Let's go with Dr. Clifton next, if that's all right. Make sure you unmute yourself first.
So we had a very depthful conversation, and really, using the guiding of how to have constructive connection. It was sort of highlighted by each speaker in the group that spoke from their heart, that it was really through vulnerability, contacting the deeper self, seeing the fear in everybody we're talking to, and speaking out of the soul. And that kind of ignites cars going by, ignites a common humanity that opens the path towards empathy. But, geez, airplane going by, a car. So I thought it was very fruitful for all of us, and pointed to ways that we can try to develop this sense of poise. If we're in our centered self, we don't have anything to be afraid of, because we're living our own truth, and that has an ability to strike a chord in other people. So it was very, very fruitful for me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clifton. Jan, would you please share?
We had a wonderful group of women, and Aish, if you can hear me, I'm sorry you dropped out. I will. We can follow up. I'd like to follow up. I think she had a technical issue. That's what I'm saying. The dropout is that she just disappeared and came back. I think what I want to report is that there was extraordinary courage displayed in the stories that people shared with us. And there were two stories that really stood out to me, where an individual, a person of color, twice confronted graphic displays of racism, one with the boss that she works with. I'm thinking of the second story I'm telling you. she took the courage to have a constructive conversation with her manager. She is a manager, and she went to her boss and as a leader and said, you know, we really, as the only person of color, as a manager, we need to address some things that I see as insensitive. As a result, her boss listened very openly. The images on PowerPoint started to change and reflect people that showed the variety of people within the organization. This person is expecting a child, and there was a virtual baby shower, and all of the books that this person received had images of people that looked like her and the baby, which we haven't seen the face yet, but pictures that the family would relate to. And the courage and the openness with which this woman spoke really has reaped benefits for all. I think it really speaks to the need for all of us to stand and have these conversations. She also, do you mind if I tell one more story? Because it's just phenomenal, or I'll stop.
Sure, you can certainly share.
Stepping into a store where cabinetry and things were being sold, she walked into the showroom and there was a picture, she said probably from 1905, of two children playing, a white child and a black child. They're playing in mud. The white child's pristine, the black child is a mess. So she said to the person that was in the store, who said, "Can I help you? Please remove that sign. That's the first thing you can do to help me." And the sign was removed. The objects were delivered to her house, and there was a misunderstanding about time. She was early, they were basically on time, but she heard them saying in phone calls of trying to connect to her to say that they were there, "Oh, she's late, she must be on CP time." To which, when these people arrived, she said, "We need to talk about something I heard on the phone." And she then, and they apologized, she then took it to the manager and to the owner of the company and said, "I'm not going to the press, but your company needs to change." I just found this to be extraordinary. And we heard other stories like this. She spoke of having the uncomfortable conversation and doing it with dignity and doing it in ways that can move things forward. And so I just wanted to share those because those are two, I thought, extraordinary stories that were shared with us.
Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome, and thank you to the person who shared it.
Great. Natalie?
Hi, everyone. We had great conversation in our group, really starting with looking at the relationships that we're having when we're talking about constructive discussions, and understanding that the reasons why we need to have these discussions are because we're finding that people are in this situation and at this time masking. They may be dismissive. We may see signs that there is a struggle to preserve a status quo that we know and we feel that it is not right. We also know that because people are in relationships that situationally were great in the past, sometimes we're reluctant to look at what is actually happening and unfolding. People in one context or in one situation were greatly supportive. We identified, but in this environment, we're sensing and becoming aware of different things. We're also, even if we're having these conversations, noting that people are hyper-focused on single acts, single events, but recognizing the importance of getting to the root cause. The conversations that we need to have need to be not focused on one or two things, because then we actually lose focus, right? We lose the opportunity to to talk about those uncomfortable things. We also recognize that social media has opened our eyes to be able to see other important behaviors and signs and red flags from language used, posts that are liked, that give us a different perspective of the people who may be in our close circles. What do we do about that? So we talked about really taking the opportunity not to jump off in terms of passion, but pulling back and getting the information we need to proceed effectively. How we say things, when we say things, using the right approach with information, understanding that people are a product of their environment, but we have an opportunity to share more. And sometimes, believe it or not, we have conversations that are nonverbal. The way we act, carry ourselves, behave, cue people into, we're not the stereotype that you might have thought. And so that might be an opening for further dialogue on change. And we really left our conversation. We were getting into another piece when one of our participants brought up the interaction between Senator Yoho and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the fact that her rebuttal and her response was measured, well thought out, constructive, and instead of being an emotional reaction, has created a wave of different thought by not only the people who are her peers, but the public at large. So these constructive discussions matter. They make a difference. And we all have the opportunity to start very small from our own experience. Sometimes we may not have the experience, but our awareness should prompt us to see things differently. We had the see something, say something, takes on a new meaning for us now and really prompts us to act differently.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Michael.
Thank you. In our group, I think two things that kind of reigned prevalent. One was just around in having kind of these crucial conversation or constructive conversation, particularly around race in the workplace, the meet them where they are, I think is so important in regards to creating just an overall foundation of understanding and just a middle ground we can just grow and build from. And so I think that's important, especially as you think about people that you work with or people you may see on a day-to-day basis. Because right now everything's so intertwined between society and the workplace, it's really important that we create kind of that those guidelines about respect and decency and compassion and caring and love in our communication with people that we work with. And I think the second thing that kind of reigned prevalent also too was just, we talk about being courageous and brave and speaking up in this moment, but also to just the risk of that as well. And so, you know, I think you have to kind of weigh out what's more important to you in those instances in terms of, is it worth staying at a place where you're unhappy and you're oppressed and you don't feel appreciated, you don't feel valued for the sake of just having opportunity? Or do you use that as fuel and just motivation to step out and say, you know what, regardless of the money, regardless of the prestige, regardless of the company that I work with, end of the day, my happiness and the fact that I matter and my values matter to me are more important. And so if that causes me to have to leave a job and be unemployed for a little bit until I find that happiness, then that might be a decision that I have to make in order to live with myself every day, look myself in the mirror and say, you know, I'm truly working on being a catalyst for change. So.
Thank you, Michael. So I will share about my group. I had a terrific group. And I would say if there were two themes that really rose to the top in our group, they would be tribe. The the consensus, I think, across the participants in our group talked about how starting with those close to us who we have trust and have built trusting relationships with, even and in some cases, especially when they may disagree with us about these important and challenging topics, is where most in our group felt was the best place to have these kinds of conversations. And those were with family, with close friends. In one case, with one member in a group of elementary schoolers, which is a tight, almost family-like environment. And that second theme around celebrating small victories seemed to emerge around those challenging conversations with those trusted relationships. And one member of our group even likened it to grains of sand on a scale, which slowly over time start to shift the balance. And I found that really, really powerful and fascinating, especially for me, who I turned 49 on Tuesday. So my son reminds me I'm close to finishing the first half century of my life. And a great deal of that first part of my first half century was spent with the mindset that I was a social justice warrior. And I would stand up and with all the force and power necessary to all those outside of my tribe, I would go after it. And I think as I've gotten older and I've learned more about communication and I've gotten new communication degrees and I've worked closely with people, but also especially I've worked very closely with organizations that are working to make a big difference in terms of implicit bias, unconscious bias, racial bias, social justice, where I've worked on projects where I found myself at the White House in the prior administration, in the New York City mayor's office, working to reduce gun violence, with a digital organization called Table Tribes, speaking of tribes, which existence was to leverage technology and the digital space to create connections that led to offline face-to-face conversations about topics that are very important and in many cases very challenging. And one thing that I see in that, and also in each of the reviews from all of the facilitators this evening, is that there is something central, and that is communication. And as Melanie mentioned, in addition to being a professor of values-based leadership, I believe that we can view leadership not only if we're in a leadership position, but also in how we lead ourselves. And I would love to share with you that it's my view that the more we are able to be intentional in how we lead ourselves, the more we'll be able to have these difficult conversations with people both within and outside of our tribe to really, truly drive change. And that's because I believe that leadership, whether it's leadership of self or others, is about relationships. And at their core, relationships are about communication, both verbal and nonverbal communication. And with that, I would love to share a quote with you that inspires me in my work by a man named Keith Yamashita, who's the co-founder and chairman of a great transformation company called SY Partners. His quote is, and it's about business, but I believe it's really related to all of what we're talking about. He said, so much of what we learn about in business is about the exterior world. It's about things like goals and objectives, about the physical world. And yet, the process of transformation is about our interior life. It's about the conversations we have with ourselves. It's about our values and our beliefs and whether they engage and nurture us or hold us back. And he went on to say that it's where our interior life meets our exterior impact, where real transformation happens. It's at that intersection. And I really believe in that. And I believe that if all of us work as hard as we can to raise our own self-awareness, understand our own story, understand how our experiences have impacted us, and also understand how we can self-manage in the moments that most trigger us or most make us feel emotional or hot or angry. It's that self-awareness and self-management that will allow us to have those more difficult conversations with greater impact. Because as we talked about in our group, to be really fully present and engaged with people, which you can only do if you're really self-aware, really confident in who you are, and really able to quiet your inner dialogue enough to fully put your attention on someone else. That, as someone mentioned earlier, I think Dr. Clifton, that could be instrumental in our ability to break through to empathy. Not just to be able to better share our own story, as many, if not most of us did tonight in one way, shape, or form, but also to be open to others with opposing point of views to at least understand their story or what drives their perceptions of the world. And that can drive at least the next step in the conversation. And as my group put it, even those small celebrations of small victories can be that additional grain of sand that can help us have these difficult, challenging conversations. So I just want to say thank you, all of you, for being here, and thank you for allowing me to contribute in a small way. This is a really amazing space that you, Nalini, and your partners have created, and I'm so grateful to have been a part of it, and to start to meet some of you, which in some way I could consider a new tribe.